You've been waiting for the analysis of the new Gaza peace. Thanks for following us during these 2 years covering this Middle Eastern geopolitical arc. Peace through strength. We hear that on the lips of most leaders who want to flatter Donald Trump and who are afraid of getting hit with 500% tariffs in the face. Yet, if geopolitics is dictated by power relations, the total elimination of the opponent requires considerable means. And that's why geopolitics is also more than ever sealed by compromises. In October 2025, Israel and Hamas reached a ceasefire agreement in Gaza under the auspices of the United States. This first agreement provides for a partial suspension of hostilities, the release of the last Israeli hostages held by Hamas, and a partial withdrawal of Israeli forces to a defined line in the Gaza Strip, and a prisoner exchange, as well as the resumption of humanitarian aid to a civilian population exhausted after 2 years of war. This truce is widely supported internationally, whether by Middle Eastern powers, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, but also beyond, with the hope that this easing will also allow the resumption of flows through the Suez Canal. After all, war is only the continuation of politics, and the truce obviously responds on both sides to an exhaustion of resources committed over the past 2 years in this conflict, logistical, financial, and human. However, the agreement puts unresolved questions on the table. What about the disarmament of Hamas, Palestinian governance in Gaza, and the withdrawal of Israeli forces? Announcing peace is one thing, building peace is another. And for now, this agreement looks more like a status quo than a resolution of the deep issues that have existed for several decades. Welcome to Terabellum. I'm announcing the long-awaited return of the Terabellum Geopolitical Review, with, this time, access to all our previous issues and the publication of the latest issue. Meet our contributors exploring power dynamics and ambiguities in today's world in the latest issue. This ranges from the role of Mossad in relation to Iran, to the situation of French diplomacy, and even to the security market in East Africa. The tone is above all realistic and analytical, with a variety of articles written by professors, researchers, or master's students. The journal is available to YouTube members who choose to support us with the analyst level and is only available on our website for those who are already analysts. You will soon receive a link with instructions on how to access it in the Community tab by clicking on the Join button and by choosing the analyst subscription at 9.99 euros per month. You support us directly. You get access to all past and upcoming issues, which means hundreds of pages of exclusive articles, and soon, more bonuses to come. Let me remind you that Terabellum is a completely independent and handcrafted media outlet, so dive with us into the heart of geopolitics, into geopolitics. This ceasefire corresponds to what we call the necessity of peace, rather than true peace in the original sense of the word. Why? The first phase of the agreement focuses on tactical steps with limited concessions from both sides. Exchange of hostages, partial withdrawal of Israeli troops, gradual restoration of humanitarian aid. Each side finds pragmatic reasons to cooperate for the time being. For Israel and politically, for Netanyahu, the release of the hostages represents, remember, a major political objective. The government has been under internal pressure for 2 years. The political opposition tried again this summer to bring down the government during a vote in the Knesset, but without success. Meanwhile, the demonstrations by Israelis to free the hostages and demand an end to the war were putting Netanyahu's coalition plans at risk. Militarily, the Israeli army also relies on a large contingent from the reserves, which has been widely mobilized and under strain for many months. On the other side, Hamas is trying to secure a truce for several reasons: to allow the Gazan population for whom it is responsible to recover, and for its remaining forces, of course, to regroup, despite its military infrastructure being more than weakened. But as soon as this phase ends, the differences will resurface. Israel will demand the complete disarmament and exile of the Hamas leaders. The latter will probably refuse any surrender on this matter, leading us to the problem of future negotiations. The continuation of a state of latent conflict, or even limited escalation. Think, for example, of targeted Israeli operations in Gaza, or skirmishes by Hamas against Israeli forces, still within the Strip, are more than likely. Remember the
du cessez-le-feu en janvier 2025, j'avais dit.
In fact, a video in February about this truce looked more like an operational pause on both sides than an everlasting peace. A month later, the war was back. It could be the same thing here. A return to large-scale war is not out of the question. If the negotiations break down for good, if Hamas and if the Netanyahu coalition believe they have resolved their internal political stability issues and have the freedom and resources to carry out an operation. The plan, presented by President Donald Trump in September 2025, is called the 20-point plan. It must be acknowledged that it represents a historic effort by the United States to impose a political framework for peace in the region, not without flaws, as we have seen. The initiative provides for the establishment of a technocratic authority in Gaza under international supervision, a reduction of Hamas governance, its gradual disarmament, and preparation for Palestinian autonomy. On paper, this plan addresses both Israel's security and the demands for an autonomous state. But it obviously has deep limitations that undermine its viability and could jeopardize this plan. In 20 points, I can already mention Hamas's distrust of the imposed measures and Israel's reluctance to make a complete withdrawal or even to recognize real Palestinian sovereignty. This is nothing new now. There's the technical complexity of disarming Hamas. How will it be done? Who will do it? Who will control it? And under what conditions? Then there's the weak legitimacy of the international interim government in Gaza. We've been told that former British Prime Minister Tony Blair could potentially be a leading figure in it. 72 years old, a vocal supporter during the Iraq War. I'm not at McKinsey, but in my opinion, that's not the kind of personality particularly appreciated in the Arab world. All of this, without even taking into account the regional and internal players. Netanyahu and Hamas don't have a monopoly on leadership either. There are many rival Palestinian groups, just as many political groups in Israel, not to mention the outside powers that could sabotage any progress. This brings us to the famous peace through strength, popularized by Trump. Here, it relies on Israel's military dominance and American diplomatic pressure, with the assumption that a balance of moderate forces will guarantee stability. However, this approach does not sufficiently take into account the historical, social, and psychological depth of the NI, the fact that the territorial dimension and the recognition of a Palestinian state remain fundamental red lines for the Palestinians and a large part of the Arab and Muslim community. To put it simply, peace through force is, for now, only meant to resolve the October 2023 war, not to settle the Israeli-Palestinian conflict once and for all. And it's the same problem we're seeing right now with Ukraine, Russia, and American mediation, where peace through force is meant to resolve a current conflict, but not the historical foundations that led to this critical situation. The only difference is that Russia has more resources than Hamas or Israel, and that Trump is unable, or at least less able, to impose his balance. Trump is not eternal either, and his term ends in 2028. In the collective memory of both peoples, this conflict does not result only from recent events. It is part of a long history, beginning at the end of the 19th century with the emergence of two national movements, Zionism, which was taking shape in its Basel program. In 1897, the creation of a Jewish state in Palestine and Arab-Palestinian nationalism. The gradual settlement of Jewish populations, especially during the first decades of the 20th century, and the British Declaration of Support for a Jewish National Home in 1917 generated tensions with the local Arab populations. Do you know what happened next? These tensions were exacerbated by the displacements, expulsions, and wars that accompanied the creation of the State of Israel in 1948, a significant event for the Palestinians. They refer to this as the Nakba, or catastrophe, in reference to the exodus of hundreds of thousands of them. Since then, wars, occupations, and diplomatic attempts have marked history, with the main issues being territorial sovereignty, the status of Jerusalem, the rights of refugees, and the security of the populations. While legitimate calls for the creation of a Palestinian state have been made on the international stage, coexistence in the region has often been hindered by internal divisions, a lack of mutual trust, and major disputes over control of territories. More broadly, the conflict is also set in a shifting regional context, marked by the Iran-Israel rivalry, tensions with Hezbollah in Lebanon, and power plays among Arab and Islamic countries, more marginal. Initially limited to a local Israeli-Arab conflict, it became regionalized through Israeli strikes against targets allied with Iran or Hezbollah, to the expansion of Iranian influence, the role of the Houthis in Yemen, and the direct influence of external powers. The stability of Gaza, therefore, also depends on the ability of international mediators to control regional actors and maintain strong diplomatic pressure, which remains an uncertain bet. Trump believes that Iran is sufficiently weakened and that its sphere of influence has receded to its borders, but Iran may not be the only one to throw a wrench into the peace process. Finally, politically, in Israel, the Netanyahu coalition remains under the influence of far-right parties who oppose any territorial concessions, which makes pragmatic developments difficult and strengthens the prospect of a political and military hardening in the short term. Trump wants to end the ongoing conflict and establish balances favorable to the United States, which requires him to put pressure on the warring parties. In October 2025, President Donald Trump clearly warned Israel that he would completely withdraw United States support if the country annexed the West Bank. This position, reported during an interview with Time, published on October 23, marks an important political turning point. Trump claims to have given his word to the Arab country, a key partner in regional balance, that he would not allow such an annexation, calling it a red line that must not be crossed. It's hard not to make the connection with all our videos on the subject, including the one about Saudi Arabia and its view of the conflict with the West Bank. This statement is not a coincidence, but comes at a time when some Israeli lawmakers have put forward bills aimed at legalizing and expanding the annexation of parts of Palestinian territory. President Trump made it clear that this move would be a declaration of war on the diplomatic efforts led by the United States, and could risk breaking Arab solidarity around the Abraham Accords, as well as the strategic alliance between Washington and Tel Aviv. This message is very interesting and echoes the video from 3 weeks ago about the grand American strategy in the Middle East. It embodies an American desire to maintain a delicate balance, seeking not to alienate the support of Arab countries, which is essential to containing Iran, and the normalization of relations with Israel to ease the burden on American defense. Remember that the ultimate goal is normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia, who will work together with Turkey, the famous triumvirate in the Middle East, intended to preserve a new balance. However, we'll have to see if Trump stays the course and if this unprecedented shift in American geopolitics will continue after him. As 2026 approaches, several scenarios remain possible regarding how things will develop. Revolution in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The period following this ceasefire is expected to be tense, marked by underlying instability, with lengthy negotiations punctuated by episodic crises, as well as fragile governance. In Gaza, true peace will require complex and demanding compromises on sensitive issues such as disarmament, local governance, border demarcation, the situation of refugees, and mutual political recognition. These issues still lie at the center of major party divisions. To put it very clearly, without a firm policy capable of integrating all regional actors, the risk of a return to violence remains high. Furthermore, internal political developments such as the purges between factions in Gaza or the Israeli election scheduled for late 2026 could significantly influence this dynamic for better or for worse. Thus, the October 2025 ceasefire should for now be seen as a temporary respite, a pause in a deeply rooted conflict. Peace in much more complex issues highlights the limits of a peace imposed by force, which does not address the root causes of the dispute, but is essentially based on the strategic vision of one man and one state and its imposition. The risk is that as soon as Trump turns his back or the United States faces difficulties, local powers return to war. The truce, although it allowed for an immediate decrease in violence and offered hope for a way out of the crisis, does not constitute a long-term peace. That still needs to be built. The Trump plan embodies this logic of peace through strength, which, despite its diplomatic skill and international support, requires efforts to move beyond a vision of peace based mainly on military domination and control. At this moment, the ceasefire has already been disrupted by Israeli strikes, and Hamas has still not disarmed. Turkey will host a meeting on Gaza on Monday, and peace still needs to be built, but everything could change again, and the ceasefire is already causing concern. I hope this video has given you some points of understanding to support us. Share your thoughts on the ceasefire in the comments and share this video. It's important, even if it seems repetitive for the YouTube algorithm. I also remind you that you can access all our magazine issues, including the latest one, by joining this channel. With the analyst rank, it allows for a fair exchange. You fund the channel and get perks like the digital magazine and your username in the video credits. The latest issue highlights fault lines in defense, diplomacy, and the defense industry. You can find an excerpt on our website. Thank you all for your loyalty. This was Quentin for Terra Bellum, and see you next time.